All right, we can get started, Madam Clerk.
Chairman Shanley.
Present.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Present.
Second Vice Chair Corvasi.
Here.
Representative Ackerman.
Here.
Representative Agello.
Present.
Representative Baginski. Representative Felix. Representative Hull. Representative Kennedy.
Here.
Representative Knight.
Here.
Representative McGaw.
Here.
Representative Nardone.
Present.
Representative Newberry.
Here.
Representative Shaw-Cross-Smith. Representative Tansey. We have a quorum.
Thank you, and welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. We have 10 bills on our calendar tonight. The first thing we're going to do is take a vote on holding all 10 of those bills for further study. That would be House Bill 7215, 7219, 7220, 7222, 7223, 7224, 7320, 7319, 7322, and 7363. Is there a motion to hold
So
those
moved.
bills? Moved by Second Vice Chair Corvasi and seconded by First Vice Chair Messier. Can we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Chairman Shanley.
Yes.
That's the First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvasi.
Yes.
Representative Ackerman. Representative Agello.
Aye.
Representative Baginski. Representative Felix. Representative Hull. Representative Kennedy. Yes. Representative Knight.
Yes.
Representative McGaw.
Yes.
Representative Nardone. Representative Newberry.
Yes.
Representative Shaw-Cross-Smith. Representative Tansey. The ayes have it.
Thank you. The first bill we're going to look at tonight comes to us from Chairman McNamara. It is House Bill 7220. We're going to try and move through the bills, not necessarily in the order they are on the calendar, but in order of when the sponsor is here, as well as to give preference to the witnesses who have come here in person to offer testimony. So Representative McNamara, you have a couple bills on tonight's calendar, so we can start with 7220, and if you'd like, while you're up there, you can put 7222 in play as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 7220 was submitted on behalf of the Governor's Office on Disabilities and the Commission on Disabilities, and it adds to the decision-making process of disability parking enforcement, someone from that commission's office. It's an inclusive bill, and it helps address an issue that I know I am passionate about, and most of my colleagues in the House are passionate about, and that is making sure that our disability parking spaces are used by the citizens who should be using them, and not used by someone just taking advantage that's too lazy to walk 15 feet to the supermarket door. So that's the motivation behind that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee on 7220? First Vice Chair Messier.
Are there any plans to do anything about people who use these disability plackets in their car that don't belong to them? Because I know a lot of people have one from a deceased member of the family, and they continue to use them all the time. And that's really taking a spot away from a legitimate disabled
I
person.
agree 100%. That's awful. It's sinful.
Bring us a list.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, aren't there expiration dates for those, so they can, I mean,
There
I
should be.
agree that there is abuse.
But you got to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chairman McNamara on 7220? If not, you can do 7222 and then 7223.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this bill is an attempt to address the proliferation of gambling issues, and it prohibits the use of facial recognition technology, biometric recognition technology, and video lottery terminals and pot parimutuel licensing, including online betting applications. It would also prohibit the use of certain other technologies in state gaming operations. The prohibition would not apply to standardized reward programs. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, you can imagine going into the casino of the future, and it'd be, you walk up to the VLT, it'll say, Chairman Shanley, nice to see you today. Would you care to participate in Texas Hold'em? Or what is your pleasure? It immediately recognizes you. It knows your gambling history. That gambling history immediately goes into an algorithm that determines. Chairman Shanley doubles his bet when he wins. So the program that they set up for you is perfectly tailored to your gambling methodology that you use, and of course, it's set up to separate you from your money. Artificial intelligence used in gambling applications, including the most dangerous application that we've wandered into, and last weekend was the greatest amount of money spent in the history of gambling on the Super Bowl. And who is making that decision? Hills Gambling, Hills Booking in Las Vegas. And they are our state's bookmaker. Now, you may ask the question, does Hills Gambling care about Rhode Islanders losing money? Or would they do something as unethical as suggesting you almost won the Super Bowl? Here is a bet that we believe you would be a good suggestion for you. So it's like push polling, except that's artificial intelligence, all set up with algorithms, and people will not know what hit them. I spoke to the director of the lottery today. I am very aware that we have people who are susceptible to problem gambling. If these systems are in place, a lot of people are going to get hurt. And I'm sure the gambling vendors will say, well, we're not doing this and we wouldn't let it happen. And they probably said the same thing about the security of United Health Care, and your data. So with that, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Corvese.
Chairman McNamara, that's a great bill. That's an absolutely great bill. One question, in your research on the bill, is there anything on a federal level that would be analogous to this?
Yes. The federal government has recently passed a ruling on the use of biometrics and facial technology. And for this reason, Representative Corvese, biometric systems only know the data that's put in. So say, for example, my cousins, they didn't put in red hair. The computer wouldn't be able to recognize those individuals. And what we have found is that these biometric systems can increase racial disparities, and they are not reliable. And unfortunately, our current system that we have now uses those biometric systems.
But is there any federal legislation that prohibits this use in any areas?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's a great bill. Thank you.
Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you. Chairman, it's interesting that Doc Corvese just asked that question. If you've ever flown in or out of the Detroit airport on Delta, and you're on an international trip, you don't scan your boarding pass or anything else.
Right.
You immediately uses facial recognition in order for you to either board that plane or not board that plane. So it is an interesting concept. The question I have for you is, when you walk into a casino, there is no privacy. You are being recorded from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave. And I don't know how this bill is going to address that, because that has been a security mechanism that's in place at these casinos, whether in Rhode Island, whether in Connecticut, whether in Las Vegas, or any other place that they happen to have them. That's the first thing. And if you belong to their frequent, whatever you want to call it, rewards program, they already know how much you're spending, what you're spending it on, whether it's at the blackjack table, the poker table, or on the video slot machines. All of that information is already available to them. And keep in mind, I don't gamble, so they don't have any of my information because I'm not going to those particular places to utilize any of those particular services. But how does your bill address that? Because if you're already providing that information, then it almost seems like what you're trying to accomplish can't be accomplished.
This bill speaks specifically to using Representative Kennedy's data. He plays, he doubles his bet after 2 losses. It individualizes your personal data from gambling, puts it into a formula that is tailored to reinforce your behavior of doubling your bets and spending more money. It's using a behavioral algorithm to alter your play. It's personalized, using your data against you, enhancing the ability of the house to win. That's the difference. And in terms of the facial recognition, this is part of when you come in, either on your phone or in front of that VLT that has those biometric measures, immediately it tailors your reward, meaning winnings, shapes that to your past betting behavior. It's using your data against you to enhance the odds of the gambling party.
Any further questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we'll move to the third and final bill that you have before us tonight, House Bill 7223, which also looks at establishing a commission to study the use of artificial intelligence in the decision-making process of state government.
And state government agencies. Well, we all know what artificial intelligence is. Series, turn to Capitol TV and turn up the volume. And we know what's happening in all of the homes that heard me right now. We also know that artificial intelligence can be both an asset and a detriment to government in terms of, if we look at what happened to United Healthcare, where members of the committee, including myself, got hacked. This was someone sitting at a computer at United Healthcare, gets an email from RIPTA, please send us the RIPTA United Health files. Well, the system on the computer did not differentiate between Rhode Island RIPTA and Rhode Island employees. It sent all of our files over to RIPTA. That's where the hack took place. Now, if RIPTA had an artificial intelligence system that looked for foreign entities trying to get in to hack that system, that data could have possibly been protected. But throughout government today, artificial intelligence systems are used, and in some case, they end up with discriminatory trends within that data, whether it's based on distance from the ocean, floodplains, all sorts of data. So I think it's very important that we have some oversight and look at how this is being used, and that's what this does.
Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Knight.
It's a good bill. It's a really good idea. That's what I got.
As concise as ever.
Thank you. Your Honor, I rest my case.
Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you, Chairman McNamara.
Thank you. Thank you, member.
There is one witness in person signed up on 7220, Bob Cooper. Good evening, Mr. Cooper. Welcome.
It's, it's nice to actually be back in a room where you can see people. As Chairman McNamara indicated, the commission approached him with regards to putting back in place something that was in the state law dealing with enhanced enforcement of disability parking, to address a couple issues. To address the people who use a relative's or deceased relatives permit. I can remember a few years back, I was contacted by the Providence Police Department. They were getting complaints that people were using disability parking spaces on the road leading up to the train station, and then sprinting to the train station to get on the train to go to work in Boston. And we worked with them to set up a sting operation just before the train was ready to leave to see all of these folks. So it is an issue that does crop up. Also, there are now, speaking of artificial intelligence, there are several websites now that provide advice on how to fight a disability parking ticket. In my written testimony, I've put down the website address so you can actually see but this is becoming a business. The existing law makes legal police departments, a number of state agencies, the ability to recruit volunteers. This law was so old that when East Providence first set up their program, they gave some volunteers Polaroid cameras. For those of you who are old enough to remember the days when we didn't carry our camera attached to our telephone. They trained them on how to remain far enough away from the car so there was no interaction between the person illegally parking and the individual. We think that same responsibility the commission would like to undertake to do something similar to address the issues because quite frankly these days most police officers have a lot more things of a higher responsibility to address than just going through the mall parking lot to see who's just run in quickly, purchase something and then run back out into their car. So if there are any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll roll back until you get to the next disability parking legislation by Representative McLaughlin.
Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Cooper? If you'd like, while you're up there, you can comment on Representative McLaughlin's bill. I don't see him here to introduce it, so I'll just House Bill 7322 from Representative McLaughlin provides that effective January 1, 2023, the Governor's Commission on Disabilities shall issue and renew a motor vehicle disability parking privilege placard. So you can offer your testimony now.
Okay. Yes, he's proposing moving that unit from the Division of Motor Vehicles to the Commission. We're not opposing that concept. It wasn't something we were even thinking about till I saw his bill. There are some things that if it was to happen, would need to be addressed in that you're looking at 1/4 of the office of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, adding responsibilities for 50,000 or so disability parking permits, hunting down the ones that have expired and not have come back, and all of those things. So if the bill is going to be addressed at some point, it probably needs to be transferred to finance, because there would be some costs. And I won't go through all of the issues that we have raised in our testimony, because it looks like you have a long agenda tonight.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? Madam Clerk, can you record Representative Hull's presence, and would you like your vote recorded in the affirmative to hold the bills on the calendar for further study?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next, we're going to move to Representative Casimiro. House Bill 7363, and there were some telephonic witnesses on the other bills that we will get back to later this evening.
Thank you,
Representative
Chairman.
Casimiro, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you. This bill was introduced last year, and it didn't really make it out of committee, but we spent the last year making improvements to it, and it basically makes amendments to the notary public laws that we have in place right now. It would recognize remote notarizations. It would cap the fees on notary signings, and just put some cleanup around notaries. It does meet it does comply with the revised uniform law on notarial acts from 2021, and the real experts will be testifying later on tonight. I just wanted to put the bill in play.
Okay, great. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Oh, we do have one question from Representative Knight.
Yes, Representative Knight.
Does this version of the bill continue to carve out lawyers from notaries?
Carve them out.
Yeah.
Did you want them in?
Well, right now, a lawyer, by virtue of being a lawyer,
Sure.
can apply for and be a notary.
We can absolutely put them in.
Well, I was just, I'm not suggesting we have a lawyer protection bill. I was just curious, and I can't remember the reason why we did this last year. Where it says attorneys and accountants. There's a section in here that would be redlined out. It says attorneys, accountants, Rhode Island bar members, certified public accountants, be appointed a justice. Oh, that's where it gets rid of the justice of the peace. All right, I'm sorry. That was the issue last year, right? It removes that connection between
Yep. We cleaned
all
it up.
those people and JPs.
We
Right.
cleaned it up since last year's discussion.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of the committee? Representative Agello.
Representative Casimiro, on page 2, I believe it is, item 8, identity proofing means a process or service by which a third person provides a notary public with a means to verify the identity of a remotely located individual by a review of personal information from public or private data sources. Can you?
I could not, I would defer it to the experts who are going to be calling in later on tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? All right. The first and only in-person witness we have signed up on this bill is David Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. David Salvatore, representing the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I submitted written testimony to all of you, so I'll keep my remarks brief. But I do appear before you in support of House Bill 7363. We thank Representative Casimiro and Representative Norrie for reintroducing this bill, permitting remote online notarization. As you know, during the pandemic, many business sectors relied on technology to keep our economy afloat. The real estate sector was no different. What we found was during that time, new technology was introduced in the real estate market, maintaining sales and even growing sales over that period of time.
In my written testimony, I provide you with information from 2020 on how successful the real estate market was. And it was because realtors and real estate licensees and brokers were very creative in making sure that sales transactions went through in a timely manner. But what they weren't afforded was the opportunity to remotely notarize important documents. There were drive-through transactions being completed so that there wasn't a lot of contact between lawyers, real estate brokers, and their customers. So this bill would put Rhode Island, or allow Rhode Island to join 33 other states who already permit remote online notarization. What I fear is that not passing this bill would mean Rhode Island would once again lag behind other states who are already adopting these new technologies. And one business service that comes to mind is e-recording. The General Assembly adopted the enabling legislation allowing municipalities to e-record documents in city and town halls across the state, but we at the time were only one of 3 states that didn't allow for that. Now there are 33 states that provide for remote online notarization. Unfortunately, Rhode Island is not one of them. So again, for the purposes of keeping real estate transactions moving in the right direction, we strongly support this bill and the opportunity to permit remote online notarization in Rhode Island. Happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Knight.
David, thank you for your testimony. So I'm remembering this from last year. One of the issues was we had just done the big notarial upgrade the year before this bill came in, and the two didn't seem to be very aligned. Have they been worked? Have you taken what you want in this bill and compared it to the current notarial law and merged the two in this bill?
So currently, Rhode Island does permit e-notarizations, which is different than remote notarizations. And at the time, I know there was some concern around privacy and technology regarding remote online notarization. So that provision was not included in the notarial update. But since that time, dozens of other states have adopted remote online notarization, which is included in this bill.
That's not
different question. Sorry.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
A couple of years back, the Secretary of State sponsored a huge overhaul of the Notarial Acts statute that we have in place, upgrading it with I forget all the things they did, but basically they brought it into the 21st century a little bit in terms of accountability, record keeping, training, that sort of thing. And then this bill came along, and it's like the two bills, it's like the law as upgraded, and this bill had never met and talked to each other. So what I'm asking is what we're seeing this year, has this been integrated into the law as it stands now?
That's my understanding. And again, I believe that upgrade did include electronic notarization at the time.
Right.
Understood. So as far as I know, Rep, it does include, or they have merged that information. I know the Secretary of State is going to be testifying in a little while. She can probably shed a little more light on that.
Because, I mean, this is a great idea, right? I just want to make sure that we do it right, because we put so much effort into that last one.
Sure. Thank you.
Any further questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to take Representative Place. Representative Place has sponsored House Bill 7224. This would require administrative hearings to follow Superior Court rules of procedure and evidence and provide for the subpoena of witnesses and evidence. You have the floor.
And I have another one on the calendar too, don't I? Right at the top.
Yes. If you would like to do that one first, 7215. This enables some Massachusetts and Connecticut-based student transportation providers without Rhode Island license and registered vehicles to operate in Rhode Island under limited conditions.
Thank you. And I'll tackle that one first because it's the simplest. What that legislation, as you described, would allow a company that does business both in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut to be able to cross-level drivers and vehicles in case of a shortage of either. This comes out of an executive order that Governor Raimondo actually issued back in the heart of the COVID pandemic. And it's something I looked at and believe that it's something that's definitely can be useful even outside of a state of emergency. Just to give you an example, Monday, the town of Burrillville actually had to go from a 1-hour delay to a 2-hour delay to actually canceling school because of the fact, not because the roads were bad, but because they didn't have enough drivers. And what the intent of this legislation would be is to allow a company like, honestly, I don't even know who handles Burrillville's contract, but I'll say First Student, for example. If they've got a depot in Massachusetts and a depot in Connecticut, and all of a sudden they have a shortage of drivers in a Rhode Island depot, they can transfer those drivers into the state, whether on a temporary basis or a short-term basis, in order to ensure that that service is still offered. And quite frankly, our kids get to school.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions on that one. Do you want to introduce the other bill?
All right, so as you said, Bill 7224 is designed to overhaul our administrative procedures. I'll keep it broad now, and if there's specific questions, I can dive into the intricacies. But in essence, what this is intended to do is within the state of Rhode Island, override Chevron deference that the Supreme Court provides to administrative agencies in the way in which they interpret laws that could be seen as not as specific as we'd like them to be. So sometimes we have as we pass a law as a as a legislative body, sometimes the laws are very specific. Sometimes we leave them open to interpretation and allow the administrating authority to interpret them and then implement the regulations accordingly. As it stands right now, generally speaking, the Supreme Court states that in a case where a citizen is appealing the decision of law, whether or not a regulatory agency's exceeded its statutory power, they have to, by default, in most cases, default and give deference to that regulating agency, hence the Chevron deference. The way I like to describe it is if you're in a criminal court, if you're the defense attorney and you object to something that the prosecutor is doing, the judge has to automatically refer to the prosecutor as to whether or not the objection is legitimate or not. And you can see from a defense attorney's perspective how that could put you behind the 8 ball when it comes to trying to actually properly, defend the rights of your clients. And in many circles, what Chevron deference does is just that with an administrative proceeding. It automatically puts the petitioner, the person who's opposing the regulatory interpretation of the law, at a disadvantage because the courts under Chevron deference are almost required to say that the administrative agency is actually interpreting the law properly, regardless of your ability to provide evidence otherwise. I've got another example, specific example. I have a constituents in my district that are having problems with DEM and Department of Health and the manner in which these two departments interpret different federal statutes, things like that. And it comes to trying to open up a business, trying to run a home kitchen. And because if you look at the plain reading of the federal statute and definitions, it almost feels like that there should be no interpretation. But unfortunately, our state departments have taken actions and promulgated regulations with different definitions. And it makes it almost impossible for my constituent to walk into a court of law and quite frankly say, DEM or Department of Health has taken upon themselves to take an overly broad interpretation of this statute, what I believe is illegal, and I am being violated with my constitutional due process. So in essence, what this law would do would bring back to our administrative process the ability to introduce evidence and to properly defend yourself within that particular administrative agency. Also, probably the most important thing in my opinion is upon appeal, the issue would have to be decided anew. In other words, the judge would not be bound by, on appeal, the judge would not be bound by Chevron deference, but would be allowed to take into account evidence provided by the person appealing the decision of the administrative agency. I think I touched about all the main points.
Any questions from members of the committee? Interesting subject. No questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kortvend, then Leader Filippi and Representative Norrie will put their bills in play, and then we'll move to the witnesses in person and then the witnesses on phone. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I'm here tonight to introduce House Bill 7319, which is basically an extension of the municipal and all public bodies, their ability to continue meeting in the hybrid fashion or virtually until July 1st. This would apply to school committees, town councils, and all municipal committees, basically. Portsmouth School Committee and Town Council named this as one of their priority bills, and I want to just thank Representative Marzakowski, because he really did the real work on this bill with the bill that we passed in the House last year. And so I was kind of bugging him because our town councils were bugging us, and he handed me the bill. So here I am.
It's a good bill. The only thought that I had was that we might want to put the sunset provision out into session next year, so that if we want to continue it, we're in session and we can continue it, and there's not potentially a 6-month gap where there are no remote meetings.
Right, because right now this would be till July 1st. That's when the current sunset is. I think you might hear from callers that have different opinions on whether we do that or not. I would be open to that, because I think particularly for the public, their ability to participate in hybrid meetings, I'm more open-minded about whether the elected officials should be granted that, but the public, it's really increased participation in meetings, I think, across the state, I would imagine, certainly in our town. So I'm totally open to that end, and I think you'll hear from other experts that might have differing opinions on that possibility. But
any questions or comments? Representative Newberry.
Just a comment. I think these remote access things are becoming increasingly popular with constituents, because you're right. I mean, sometimes people can't make it to, or if it's not the greatest weather, they want to go out. And I haven't read the bill in detail, but the one issue I'd have is I think it's important for the elected officials or appointed officials to be there live. Like, this is not in lieu of live meetings. This is giving, like we're doing here, sort of, right, allowing people to call in if they want to, but they can also come in person, and the people on the boards or commissions have to actually be there. Is that the intent, or?
right now, it allows the elected members the option to participate remotely as well.
I mean, I understand that, well, I think we should all be doing things live, as we all know, but I don't like doing that in perpetuity, because I think it causes people to be lazy, frankly. I mean, I've called in occasionally last year, I've called committees, but when you're not here, you're not really active. None of us really. We try to be, but we're not. So that's the only part that I would change. I'd make the people on the board
And
commissions.
I think you'll probably hear some, I've already heard that some people feel that way, so, and including people in my own town, so I totally respect your opinion, but my understanding is this would allow, at least till July 1st, all members, the elected people and the public, to participate virtually if they so choose.
Representative McCall.
Would this bill allow for those individual meetings to make that determination as to whether or not their members would be able to participate remotely or not? Would it allow for the committees or organizations to make that determination?
I don't see that written in here. No, I think if you offer up that option to the public, I think the elected members, that's my understanding. Maybe somebody will tell us, maybe, I'm pretty sure John Marion will testify, maybe he'll be able to tell us differently. But to my understanding of the bill, that the elected officials have the option.
Yes, Representative Shallcross-Smith.
I think this is a great bill. Thank you very much for putting it in. I think it also takes into consideration family situations. Sometimes at 7 o'clock at night, mom and dad has to work late, and they might have 9 years old, but you can't leave a 9-year-old at home. We can go on a virtual meeting. I think it's a great way to really bring families together and also talk about Rhode Island weather. You never know how that's going to be. So great bill. Thank you for putting it in. Would you set the sunset date to a different date, as the chair said?
I'm open to that. I defer to you all. Right now, it's July 1st, the way it is. So I think you should hear the rest of the comments, but I'm open-minded personally.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any further questions or comments from members of the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Leader Filippi, do you want to put your bill in play? Thank you for coming all the way down the hallway to see us.
I appreciate it. It's good to be back before the committee, Chairman Shanley. Members of the committee, good to see you all again. This is an amendment to our Lobbying Reform Act. Currently, as you know, when someone lobbies state government, they have to register, they have to say who their client is, and the Secretary of State must maintain a database for the public to search and see who is lobbying state government, how much they're being paid. It's a great system that we have. Unfortunately, it stops at state government. There's a lot of lobbying going on down at the municipal level, and a lot of that is done behind closed doors, and we don't know whose interests are being represented, who they're working for. And so all that this does is say that municipal government, the lobbying of municipal governments and local fire districts is included within our Lobbying Reform Act. The Secretary of State has a system, a computer system, database already set up. I don't think it will be difficult to incorporate this additional registration. It makes sense. We really are a model up here. We see the lobbyists walking around with badges. They have to tell us who they're working on, who they're working for, and what they're working on. I don't see why we don't have that at the municipal level. I don't see why. Our municipalities spend billions of dollars. They control so many aspects of our lives, our property, that we need to know who's lobbying in them and who they're working for.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Any questions from members of the committee? No questions.
It's been an honor, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks for coming over. Representative Norrie?
Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. This is House Bill 7320. This came to me in watching some activity with local organizations looking for state space. This bill, this House resolution would create a 13-member special legislative commission whose purpose would be to study and provide recommendations to mitigate the associated costs for state-owned vacant and abandoned properties. We all know that there's a lot of property out there and that we're paying to heat and keep electric on, so those buildings and properties stay running and not damaged, and nobody's using them. So it would be for no later than February of 2023, so it would give that commission 1 year to kind of get to the bottom of where our money is being spent and if there was a better way to spend it.
It's a great idea. Any questions from members of the committee? Nope.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so we're going to go back through and try and get to witnesses who are in person. On Representative Cortvan's bill, we have Tim Duffy here in person. And then after that, it looks like we may be moving to telephonic witnesses. Good evening, Mr. Duffy. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I represent the Rhode Island Association of School Committees. We support Representative Cartran's bill. There is some confusion as to how we're conducting remote meetings. Yesterday, the governor issued an executive order extending the ability to have remote participation at meetings, but it only was extended to this upcoming Monday, February 21st. So I would wholeheartedly agree with the chair's recommendation that the bill be extended to a point in time next year, early in the session, to allow the legislature to review and decide if they want to continue it out or set up a process to allow for it to go forward on a permanent basis. But I support the bill and be more than happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you. Next, we're going to move to telephonic witnesses that we have signed up on 7319, and I'll just read their names, and then we'll see who we can get on the phone. We have John Marion, Jeremy Chapata, Hannah Stern, Laurie Barrett, Randall Rose. Let's see who we can get on the phone first. Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good evening. My name is John Marion. I'm testifying on behalf of Common Cause Rhode Island on House Bill 7319. I just want to be fairly brief, but recognize that, as you heard, public bodies and the public need some certainty as we go week to week with these executive orders on this issue of remote participation and access. My organization believes that a bill like this can provide some needed predictability in the short term. But we did want to make two other points very clear. One is that there is a provision in this bill that is a permanent provision. It deals with the URI Board of Trustees, and it would allow that board to meet, the entire board to meet remotely forever. It has no sunset. And we object to having a permanent provision in a bill that is meant as a temporary measure. We supported an earlier bill involving URI several years ago, and we think that should be debated on its merits, expanding that. The second point and last point we want to make is that this doesn't, in our opinion, represent a long-term solution to changes to the Open Meetings Act that would incorporate technology. We don't think it has all the necessary safeguards to protect the public interest, and we think there are several loopholes that will be, and we have seen them abused by public bodies over the last 2 years. And I want to acknowledge, I was listening to the testimony, you know, as Representative Newberry raised, there are issues of accountability, particularly for elected public bodies, that aren't addressed in this bill. So Common Cause is ready to work with the sponsors, with this committee, with the legislature to craft a long-term solution that balances accountability and access and participation in a permanent change to the Open Meetings Act. But in the meantime, we think that this represents, with those two caveats, represents a good short-term solution. I would caution, though, that, and I heard some of the discussion about extending this until next year. The big concern there on our part, and I think you'll probably hear this from the ACLU as well, is just that once this goes too long, there's going to be a real temptation to just pull the sunset away. And I'm afraid this is not a good permanent policy that balances accountability and access. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Marion? No questions. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Good evening and welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. Maybe not.
Sorry.
Anybody there?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Is this Hannah?
Yes, it is. Hi,
Great.
Chairman.
Welcome.
How are you?
You have the floor to talk for as long as you want until we can figure out how to get everybody else.
Oh, great. I just want to double check. I'm signed up on 2 bills tonight, so I just want to double
We're
check
on
which one.
7319, the Open Meetings Act bill.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Chairman and members of the committee, for your time this evening. My name is Hannah Stern, testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island. We really understand that striking a balance between the expanded public access to meetings, which are being conducted remotely, and the accountability that's lost when these public bodies don't meet in person is difficult. So we support this legislation as a temporary measure as we see transmission rates continue to be fairly high throughout the pandemic. That being said, we think that there are 2 amendments which need to be made to this bill before consideration, which I'll just go over briefly. First, this legislation would allow the URI Board of Trustees to hold meetings remotely permanently. We think this would be an inappropriate change, which undermines the compromise that was achieved last year, which allows for remote participation as long as a majority of the board continue to meet in person. But this additionally undermines this entire bill's premise as a temporary process, and we think that this URI provision should be provisional in line with the rest of this bill. Second, we're very opposed to a provision within this bill which allows for public bodies to destroy recordings of their meetings after 200 days. We think this is just bad public policy, but it's also just counter to basic archival standards involving the records of public agencies. So we strongly urge that this language be deleted. If these two amendments are made, the ACLU supports this bill as a temporary measure, and we look forward to future conversations about how remote meetings can factor into our ongoing public processes. Thank you very much for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Did you submit written testimony with those amendments?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we did.
If you'd like to testify on 7223 as well, you can do that.
That would be great if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Chairman. Thank you again, members of the committee, for your time. Again, my name is Hannah Stern, testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island. We're very supportive of this legislation, H7223. And we're also very appreciative of the way that Representative McNamara has really brought quite a few proactive pieces of legislation concerning the very important issue of artificial intelligence. This legislation in particular would provide for an examination of the way that artificial intelligence can factor into government and state policy initiatives, which we think is an incredibly important issue and very deserving of legislative scrutiny, especially because of the ways that this technology has been found to either facilitate or exacerbate disparities in many areas. And we think that ensuring that policy is not unintentionally doing either of those is very critical. As this committee is aware, several types of AI and predictive modeling technologies in just the last few years have been found to perpetuate these systemic biases or compound current discriminatory patterns. Representative McNamara actually addressed this in particular. He addressed the racial disparities that we see in facial recognition technology, which, for example, have been shown to have alarming rates of inaccuracies, in particular for Black individuals. And there are also algorithms which have been shown to disqualify job seekers who apply for positions based on discriminatory gender biases and other systemic biases, to just give two examples. So the risks of implementing text like this that could perpetuate these harmful systems, the risk is not small or hypothetical, and we think it's very deserving of this legislative examination. And so, again, we urge passage of this bill. Thank you very much for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee for Ms. Stern? No questions. Thank you again.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Next witness we will hopefully be able to get on the phone is Jeremy Chapetta. Good evening, Jeremy. How are you?
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good. You're here signed up to testify on House Bill 7319, and you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate the time this evening to address the committee and for your consideration of this bill. I run Blackstone Valley Prep, which is a public charter school, and as such, we are fully compliant with the Open Meetings Act and meeting as a public body. I will tell you that over the course of the pandemic, we have had great success in engaging families and engaging our board, engaging members of the public to actually have greater access to our public board meetings because of the use of technology. And we found, our stakeholders have found it more convenient. They are able to access information, get full transparency, hear the conversations in a way that has helped shine a brighter light on the public process. And I'm really thankful that this bill is being considered. And my hope is that we continue to leverage technology to support greater transparency. The last thing I'll just say is that as a parent and as an educator and as a superintendent, I have a lot of commitments. And I'm thankful that tonight I'm able to call in and speak with you on our high school's senior night. So I'm going to walk out from this meeting that I've been watching over Capitol TV, and I'm going to be able to celebrate our seniors on the basketball court tonight as they go off to college and careers. And And I know that many of our families feel the same way when they have to choose between hiring a babysitter and coming to a board meeting. And when they can log in over Zoom, they can do both. So again, thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Tripata from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again. Next witness we have via telephone is Laurie Gaddis Barrett. Good evening, Laurie. How are you?
Hi, Chair Shanley and members of the committee. Thanks for reaching out. I was a little worried there for a second. I'm here tonight in support of House Bill 7319 regarding the remote participation in public meetings. And I'm pleased to see this back before the committee. I know that H5891 was very similar, that passed in the House last year. Obviously, increased participation by the public that's been continually demonstrated. The bill's good for parents. There's no need to pay for a babysitter. Good for the elderly during inclement weather, especially up here in my area of the woods, which is Foster, Gloucester. It recognizes the desire of the people who prefer to attend in person. And what's different now that wasn't true last year is that each town now has their ARP funding and can afford to pay for the upgrades, the audiovisual upgrades that would be necessary to comply. I know that a lot of towns are already doing this, but I really feel like it needs expansion. One thing that I haven't heard tonight, just a reminder that there are people who are employed at their jobs. This provision would allow them to avoid taking vacation time to travel and participate in in-person meetings. They wouldn't, that take place during business hours. I especially appreciate the inclusion of the packet documents with the agenda. I haven't heard that mentioned yet, unless the previous caller mentioned it. But I think it's really important for the public to help them to be able to follow along. I thought that was a really nice addition. And I've heard some concerns about accountability. And yes, it's true, there are some people that are elected or appointed that make it a little lazy and try to dial it in. But I think that it's also equally important to remember the smaller districts and towns. And, we have budget boards and economic development committees on which I participated. And, sometimes it's a struggle if you have parents that are serving, struggling to raise a quorum. So I'm hoping that as you consider the bill, there's a way to meet in the middle on that somehow, with accountability and the ability to raise a quorum. And again, as I testified last year, my tweak is I'd like to see this be permanent. I know there's a lot of people that think it shouldn't be, but that's my vote. So it's a good bill, urge passage, and especially I'd like to see something happen before the executive order expires on February 21st. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Have a great night. Good evening. Please state your name, and you have the floor to testify on House Bill 7319.
Thank you. My name is Randall Rose. I am testifying against this bill, which destroys a good deal of the Open Meetings Act. Our Open Meetings Act has traditionally protected the right of Rhode Islanders to attend any government meeting in person. This bill takes that right away. It says that any government body can choose to exclude the public from attending meetings in person and allow the public to attend only online. And in practice, what online attendance often means is that people are only permitted to speak by phone. I've seen many meetings where online participants can only speak by phone, as happens here. You don't see the person who's actually talking. All you may see is what I see on my video screen now, an old-fashioned telephone lying on the table with nobody listening to it. It really reduces the public voice if people can't speak in person, because if you are only allowed to call in by audio, there's no way that a person, even the most eloquent testimony, can get shared online or go on TV if all you have is audio. It's also important to ensure that people can attend in person so that they will be able, so that they can support each other by their presence. If a speaker is unjustifiably cut off by the chair, it helps to have other people in the room who can show by their facial expression that they don't like this. And it's long been a protected right for people to be able to attend meetings in person. We shouldn't take it away. This bill technically expires at the end of June, but I don't believe that it's likely to be, if it passes, I don't believe it's likely to be allowed to expire then. I think it will be extended and become permanent. I understand that there's a desire to allow online testimony. Allowing online testimony is good, but it should not come at the expense of the right to the public to attend meetings in person. The best bill that could be passed on this subject would be a bill that requires all meetings to be accessible both online and in person. That is, it should require all meetings to be hybrid meetings. Unfortunately, this bill does not require all meetings to be hybrid meetings. It allows any meeting to cut off the public from attending in person so that only the government officials are allowed to be there in person and appear on the video. And it would be better to protect both the right to attend in person and the right to attend online. And the way to do that is to make the only option to be having hybrid meetings. Hybrid meetings are by far better than either online-only meetings or in-person only meetings. If you want to protect public participation, that's the way to go. But what this bill does, unfortunately, is it says it's going to protect the right to attend online, but it does that only by gutting our long-standing rights to attend meetings in person, and that's unacceptable. I think the bill should be changed to allow only hybrid meetings because if you allow other options besides hybrid meetings, government bodies can exclude either online participants or in-person participants, and that's not acceptable. So I want to make sure that any bill that's passed on the open meetings law does not reduce any of the rights that were long protected by open meetings law, including the right to attend in person. There's no good reason for not requiring every meeting to be hybrid. With modern technology, any government body can set up a hybrid meeting. It's not that difficult, and that would be the way to make sure that everybody gets to attend, not only the people who attend online, but also the people who want to be there in person. So that, for those reasons, I oppose the bill. There are also some other problems with the bill. For example, it doesn't require documents to be available online before the meeting, unless they were in possession of the government body at the time the agenda was posted. And a lot of government bodies will claim they don't have the documents in their possession when the agenda is posted, which means they won't post it at all. So there are other flaws in the bill, but the real problem with it is that it takes away the centerpiece of the Open Meetings Act by allowing government bodies to exclude people from being there in person. So I'm opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I see that you're also signed up on Chairman McNamara's bill 7222. Would you like to offer your testimony on that bill now while you're on the phone?
I don't want to. I think people have been speaking on 7319, so I don't want to go out of sequence.
So you are the last witness on 7319 and the only witness. Actually, there's two witnesses. No, you're the only witness on 7222. So you wouldn't be speaking out of turn.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was okay. So yes, I am in favor of Chairman McNamara's bill 7222, which deals with a really insidious problem where gambling devices will develop profiles of consumers and use those profiles of consumers to manipulate them to bet more. And I understand that gambling is a source of revenue for the state. That's good, but it can also be a deadly addiction. It can really destroy people's lives. and we should not, because gambling is rightly a very regulated industry, we should not be allowing gambling devices to be manipulating consumers to bet more and more and get into an even deeper financial holes. So this is a very common sense bill. I don't think this kind of algorithmic manipulation of consumers should have been allowed in the first place. But if you go to a casino or an online gaming system and you decide to gamble, you should be treated the same when you're gambling as somebody who's just starting out. The system should not be profiling you and directing you to have different outcomes based on your gambling history, because there are systems that use techniques called intermittent reinforcement to induce people to think, yes, I'm winning, yes, I'm going to get more if I just keep playing longer. And that makes them risk more and more money in a way that ends up putting them further behind financially. It shouldn't be allowed, and this is a common sense regulatory bill. It just goes back to the traditional practice in the gambling industry before the use of algorithms were developed to manipulate consumers to bet more based on their gambling history. So I am in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Rose? No questions. Thank you, Randall.
Thank you.
There are 3 witnesses remaining on the list tonight. We have Jordan Goyette, who is signed up on 7322 and 7220. Then we'll take Maureen Ewing from the Rhode Island Secretary of State's office, and then Leonard Lopes. Okay. Okay. Good evening. Is this Maureen? Nope. Is anyone there? Maureen?
Hello?
Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm so sorry. We had some technical difficulties, I think.
Well, we have you now, and that's what's important. So feel free to proceed with your testimony on Representative Casimiro's Bill 7363.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, I'm Maureen Ewing, Director of Business Services for the Rhode Island Office of Secretary of State. And I thank you, Chairman Shanley, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding the remote online notarization bill. I'd also like to thank Representative Casimiro for continuing to move this issue forward, in addition to our partners who've worked so diligently with us on this issue. The Department of State has also drafted legislation addressing remote online notarization that should be introduced soon. As the pandemic begins to place limitations on the ability to conduct many transactions in person, our office heard directly from attorneys, bankers, and realtors that needed to be able to continue to notarize in a safe, secure way. In response, our office worked with the governor, the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, and the Rhode Island Bar Association, among others, to enable remote online notarization on a temporary basis via an update to the existing executive order regarding the conduct of notaries public. As it stands now, once the state of emergency expires, so will the ability to perform remote notarization. This would mean that a popular and sometimes necessary service that has been enabled and has worked well for nearly 2 years will no longer be available to Rhode Islanders. Additionally, notaries across the state who have invested in the technology to provide secure remote notarization will no longer be able to use it. Currently, we have just over 20,000 commissioned notaries, and 124 of them have invested in the technology that also serves the elderly and disabled community. Lastly, 31 states and counting have permanent laws on the books that allow for remote notarization. This service has proven to be beneficial for Rhode Island notaries and our citizens who need these services now more than ever. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of remote online notarization, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ewing from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you for your patience tonight.
Okay, thank you so much.
Chairman, Jordan Goya is still a voice message.
Okay, so Mr. Goyette's not available? Okay. All right. Good evening, Leonard. How are you?
Over 20,000.
Mr. Lopes?
Yes, sir.
How are you tonight?
Doing well, Chairman. How are you?
Good. You are our last witness of the evening and signed up on Representative Casimiro's bill in vehement opposition.
No, in strong support, actually.
Oh.
First, yeah, no, I'm in strong support. On behalf of Notarize, I wanted to thank Representative Casimiro for her leadership on this bill. I submitted a written testimony that puts forth a position. My client is a digital trust provider that integrates technology with live human interaction to transform how people verify identities and conduct business online. Also, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is I'm going to submit to you and the committee members a little video that shows how my client performs its function. I think it'll serve as a better way to, if anyone wants to be educated on the process, than me babbling at the end of a long night. Speaking of night, there was a question about the redacting of the lawyers and accountants. I came into this process a little late last year, Mr. Chairman, so I don't have an answer as well, but I can certainly get one, and if it makes it palatable that the lawyers and accountants get put back in, my client has no objection to that. So with that, I just want to once again thank Representative Casimiro for her leadership on this, and conclude my testimony there.
Thank you. Representative Agello, did you have a question from earlier in the evening for Mr. Lopes?
Yes. Hello, Leonard. Happy New Year.
How are you? Happy New Year to you as well.
I'm well, thank you. And you?
You know what? Can't complain, Can't
Good.
complain.
Okay.
How can I help you?
I think that video will be very helpful in showing us how this works. And I've thought of another question.
Sure.
With mail-in ballots needing right now to be notarized or witnessed by two people, I have at least one constituent couple who have problems with that. One of the married couple is seriously ill, and so ill that he really tries to limit his person-to-person contact as much as possible, only really seeing doctors. Is there a way that that this couple might use this remote notary process to get their absentee ballots notarized?
It's a great question. I'll certainly bring it back to my client, but I don't want to speak for the fine people at the ACLU, but they have a proposed amendment that I've looked at, and quite frankly, I think it may address the concern you have, but I'll certainly verify that for you. It's certainly a reasonable request, and so I'll certainly get back to you on that, Representative. I just want to make sure I give you the correct answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from members of the committee for Mr. Lopes? Seeing none, that will conclude Mr. Lopes' testimony. Thank you for the call, Leonard.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I assume we're still unable to reach Mr. Goyette? Okay. That will conclude testimony on 7363, and testimony on all bills for this evening. So with that, I move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.